Okay, so welcome everyone. We're in Shin Yud Chet, Sif Dalid. We'll start with the Daf Makorot that I have. We're going to actually talk about some really sort of famous topics. At least in my mind, they're famous and very relevant. Maybe the most important and most famous and most relevant topics that we could talk about, which is Bishul Achar Bishul and Bishul Achar Afia in Hay. These are pretty important because this comes up with like questions like, can you put your cholent back on the, can you heat up, I don't know, liquid food or solid food on the plata on Shabbat? Very relevant question. Wait a second. I've got my screen view here. Okay. Which source do I want to start with? Yeah, I want to actually I want to skip the first source that I have on my source sheet and go to source number 6, which is Shabbat Lamed Daled, Amud Aleph and Amud Bet. Somebody want to? That's a pretty important source there. Somebody want to read that? It's source number 6 on my page, and it's Lamed Daled, Amud Aleph, and Amud Bet. Yeah, great, Reuven.
Okay. Amar Rava, mipnei ma'amru ein tomnin b'davar she'eno mosif hevel mishachashecha. Gzera shema yartiach. Amar le Abaye ihachi ben hashmashot nami nigzar. Amar le stam kederot rodchot hen. Okay, let me pause for a second. So Rava said, why do they say that you can't insulate this thing is talking about hot water, can't insulate hot water in something that doesn't add heat.
Talking about like, I imagine like let's say a pot of soup or of hot water. You want to cover it with like a blanket to keep it warm. Devarsha Eino Mosif Hevel is like a blanket. It doesn't add heat. What is Devar that's Mosif Hevel?
Hot sand is a good example. So
hot sand, okay. Or what about like what is it called? Olive pulp, something like that. Like something that's like chemically, changing, creating some kind of heat. Or even like maybe ash from the fire that might have even a coal in it. Yeah, Zagit. What did you write, Exi? Zagin?
Right, there's Zagin is like the plural, and then there's the Zefet is whatchamacallit. That's not the Zagin is the olive pulp.
The olive pulp, yeah. Thank you. So those are things that, like, as it chemically decomposes, it probably creates it's like a compost. It creates kind of heat. Okay, so we're talking about not that. We're talking about wrapping it with a blanket. So why can't you do it? When are we talking about? Mishachashecha, which means ben hashmashot. Right. Why can't you do it? Why can't you put a blanket on your soup? Ben hashmashot.
Gzera shema yartiach. So it's a gzera, lest you come to boil it on Shabbos.
Why would you come to boil it? So look at Rashi. Look at Rashi.
Which Rashi? Mishachashecha?
Yeah.
Okay. Mishachashecha. Kititznan b'matnitzin v'tomnin etzachamin tama desafek.
No, wait. That's a famous Mishnah that we all read, right, on Erev Shabbat, right? Tomnin kititznan b'matnitzin tomnin etzachamin. That's when is that? Ben hashmashot. right? Safek chashecha, safek eno chashecha. You don't know. That's benish mashot. You can tomnim. But mishachashecha, once it's already dark, you can't. Now you can't on Shabbat take something off the plata and then wrap it with a blanket. Now go on. Taima.
Tama de safek chashecha, havade chashecha ein tomnin, v'stam hatmana b'davar she'eno mosif hevel. Te'ilu b'davar she'mosif hevel, afilu b'od yom asur, k'tznan b'perek dalet, ein tomnin lo begefet chule. Gzer shemayim se
Okay, no. This is a little bit confusing. Took me a little bit of time to figure out how you have to punctuate this. Actually, what you just read is like a sograyim, is in that whole thing is in like a parenthetical expression. And from Vistam Hatmana until V'chule. So basically you have to go from Tama, so back where it says V'tama the Safek Hashecha, Ha'avadai Hashecha, Ein Tomnim. So if it's for sure dark, you can't wrap your soup in a blanket. And then now he says Gezerah, why can't you do it?
Gezerah shema yimtze kederato shenitztanena ksheyirtze lahatmina ve'artichena tchila v'nimtza mevashel b'Shabbos. So it seems like if your food is completely cooled down, you're not going to do hatmana on it. You're going to want to heat it up first and then do hatmana. Otherwise, what's the point of insulating it at all? And then you're going to come to do bishul, I think is what's going on.
Right. In other words, you don't want to do hatmana on something that's lukewarm. You want to do hatmana, you want to get nice piping hot and then cover it. So if we would let you do hatmana on Shabbos, you might try to get it piping hot before you did hatmana, and that would be bishul. So that's the explanation of why you can't do hatmana mishachashecha once it's Shabbos. Gezerah shema yartiach. So what is gezerah shema yartiach? Back to the Gemara, Gezerah shema yartiach. Maybe you'll boil up that soup so you get it nice and hot. Okay, so go on. Amar le Abaye.
Amar le Abaye, ihachi ben ashmashot nami nigzar.
So now you can explain the question.
So if the reason that you can't do it is Gezerah shema yartiach, then we should say that you also shouldn't be able to do it ben ashmashot, which we know isn't the case because of the Mishnah.
Right. The Mishnah said you should. Why should you not be able to do it on Benish Mashot? Why should you not be able to do it Hatmana on Benish Mashot?
It's the same issue. It's the same issue that your food is cooled down. You're gonna want to heat it up first.
And heating it up, Benish Mashot is safek the right to aser, right? It's certainly so. You're gonna have to be machmir there too. Okay. So what's his answer?
Answer, Amarle, Stam Kederot Rotchoten.
Now the shot of this doesn't make sense. It says all Stam Kedera, all Kederot are hot. Well, then why do we care in the first place? So Rashi has to explain that what we really mean is Rotchoten. Look at Rashi.
Rotchoten she samuch leben hashmashot hu ma'avira me'al ha'or v'leika lemechash leshema nitztanena v'artichena. So you're pulling it, ben hashmashot, when you pull it off the fire, it's going to be boiling, and you're not going to come to reheat it again. You can just insulate it immediately.
But if it would be on Shabbos.
But if it's on Shabbos.
Then you've already taken it off the fire
right,
earlier.
It's cooled down. Sorry, yes, it's
already probably cooled down.
That's right.
So dafka bein hashmashot is the time when you can do hatmana because it's probably still hot. Also before Shabbat you could do it. Before bein hashmashot. Okay. Wait, so what's the end here? Let's read the end.
Okay, should I keep going? Of Amarava?
Yeah.
Amarava mipnei ma amru ein tomnin b'davar hamosif hevel v'afilu mi b'od yom. Gezerah shema yatmin b'remetz sheyesh ba gechelet.
Right. So remetz is that like ash with coals maybe in it. And then you might, and what's the problem with that? Amar le Abaye v'yatmin. What's the problem? So you could do that. So what's the problem? Right. It's before Shabbat.
Gezerah shema yechateh b'gechalim. You're gonna stoke the coals. That's
You're
the
going to stoke the coals to get them nice and hot. And therefore, even Bein Hashmasha, we're not going to let you do that. Okay, that's the first Gemara. So what do we see from this Gemara? How does this relate to Bishul Achar Bishul? I mean, if you've seen the Beit Yosef, you'll see how does it, or if you haven't seen it, you can try to figure it out. Why does this relate to Bishul Achar Bishul according to Rashi? Look at in the Rashi. How does the Rashi imply that Bishul Achar Bishul is Bishul, is a forbidden act on Shabbos? All right, Ruvain.
The Gezerah of Shema Yartiach seems to imply that if your food cools down, you cooked your food, it cools down, then you're going to heat it again, and then you're going to insulate it. So after your food has been cooked, cooled, and heated once more, brought to a boiling point, it implies that there's like a further stage of bishul that you can bring it to.
When? Which? At what point?
I think at the after boiling point, but at the hatmana point.
Wait, I'm saying, what act did he do that's bishul? The hatmana or the bringing it to a boil?
Well, both, but I think I think both seem to be.
Well, but which one really? Which is which is for sure? In other words, he's got fully cooked food. What could you say? What could you say differently? If there would be no such thing as bishul achar bishul, then what would you say to Rashi? You would say, Rashi, you don't make sense. Why?
Because reheating is not cooking.
Right? Because we're worried that you're going to reheat this food. It was already cooked fully before Shabbat, and now you're just reheating it. So it's the heating and the boiling, the bringing it to a boil, not the hatmana really. The bringing it to a boil later should be mutter if there's ein bishul achar bishul. And yet we see Rashi saying that's the whole reason for that's forbidden. It's bishul. What other explanation could Rashi have given that would have maybe not implied that bishul achar? If Rashi would have held that there is no bishul achar bishul, then how would Rashi have explained the Gemara? In other words, I want to prove to you that the Gemara doesn't necessarily imply this. It's Rashi. How could you learn the Gemara to say there ain't bishul achar bishul? What would be the gezerah when it says Shema Yartiach? What would that mean?
It would be like a tolda of lighting a fire.
Right. So what does it mean, Yartiach? How do you Martiach something? How do you cause something to boil?
You increase the heat.
You increase the heat. Exactly. So maybe you could learn the Gemara that Shema Yartiach means not literally Yartiach, Shema, Yadlik Eish Kedei Lahartiach. But Rashi's pshat is better, really, because Shema Yartiach means that you'll boil it up. That is the word, so that's really a better pshat. Okay, so I'm just pointing out that anybody who said, bishul achar bishul is not really a problem, here we see clearly Rashi is implying it. Yeah, Joel.
But I mean, you could, like Rashi's going to do in the comment we skipped right from the end. You could say that it's only about something that's like machal ben drosai, not mevushal kol tzarcho, right?
Okay, yeah. Well, that's you get right.
There's another split we're going to see.
Whole discussion is about that. Is right. Another explanation you could say is that Rashi is assuming the food is not fully cooked. I just sort of threw in there when I explained it that it's fully cooked. But you could say, oh no, this is only talking about it's not fully cooked. Okay. Whatever not fully cooked is. I mean, yeah, whatever level we want to talk about. All right, let's look at the next Gemara. This is a short one. Somebody else want to read? Here, Jacob, go for it.
Semer Leora Ligzor or Amarava Beora Kura.
Amar Shmuel I have, no?
Oh, what did I say? I'm sorry. Amar Shmuel B'Yora Akura V'nichus Shema Magis B'Deva Kura V'Tocha.
So wait, you got to go slow. This is actually
Yeah.
like a statement, an answer, and again, another question. It's all in one little line here.
Putting wool into a pot, they should make a decree on it.
What decree would we make? You had to, I mean, I just want to say in general, when I give sources, it doesn't necessarily mean that I give you the whole context to understand it. Sometimes you have to actually look at what we're talking about here. And this is a case where I just gave you the relevant part, but look, what are we talking about here in this Mishnah? The truth is,
well,
what?
It could be Shovea or it could be Bishel.
No, but what's going on? What are we goes there? Goes there what?
That you shouldn't put it into a pot, I would think, or you shouldn't.
Yeah, but it's not. Is it on Shabbos? What are we doing? You're doing this on Shabbos. When are you doing this? Anybody? Ori? No, well, not exactly. No, Joel.
Just looking at the comment.
You're leaving wool in like a dyer's pot all over from before Shabbos to sit there over Shabbos and getting color.
It's like if you remember, there's a famous machloket between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. Although this is not relevant to that machloket, but there's a machloket. Can you like start a process before Shabbat and let it work all Shabbat for you? Can you like put a weight on your pile of grapes and like let it squeeze all Shabbat? Or here we're saying, you want to put semer into a big pot of dye, a very boiling hot dye, and just let it sit there all Shabbat. And by the end of Shabbat, you'll take it out and you have very dyed wool. So maybe we should ligzor, maybe we should forbid that, which we didn't forbid it. It's permitted to do that, to put it in before Shabbat and let it sit all Shabbat. But why should we ligzor? Because maybe you will move around the coals on Shabbat to keep it hot, to keep it hot. So Shmuel says his answer no. The reason why Shmuel basically says ein hachanami. If it would be on a fire, you would be gozer on it. But he answers Amar Shmuel. What does he mean?
When the pot has been removed from the heat.
Exactly. It's not even on the fire, so therefore that's why it's permitted. If it would be on the fire, it would be forbidden. Yeah. Okay, so now the Makshan asks another question.
Yeah, but we're worried maybe he'll stir what's in the pot, and
right. Nichush doesn't mean we worried. Shouldn't we worry? V'nichush, and let us worry. Maybe he'll stir it. In other words, that's also a problem. Even if it's off the fire, he might stir it.
Yeah.
So what is the answer?
V'tocha.
Ba'akura, de ba'akura. When I said it was ba'akura, de ba'akura v'tucha, and also plastered closed.
Okay.
So there's no chance that he would stir it. Now, what do we see from this magis? Why are we? What's the problem of magis? So let him stir it. Why shouldn't he be able? It's off the fire. What's the problem of stirring? You see what I'm saying? Like, why is that? It's not cooking. It's already cooked. You can't stir it. You can't take cholent off of the fire and stir it.
Well, I don't know if this is right, but with wool, when you aggravate it, that's how you make felt, and so you're changing the nature of the wool into felt, and perhaps that's parallel to cooking, like in the same way that I don't know, when you cook a matzo ball, it goes from who knows to like actually hard. Like you're facilitating that.
It's not felt, because felt is if you get it wet and then you mash it with like you smash it, but it's not in a pot. Here we're talking about in a boiling pot and you're dyeing it. It's close to what I think is a possible explanation. One of the explanations, I think the Rosh, if I recall, it's the Rosh gives. What is it's close to what you're saying. Anybody else?
I mean, I was thinking that if the pot's removed from the heat, but it's still hot, it'll be hot in some parts and might be cooler on the top. So if you're stirring it, you're reheating.
You're heating up maybe the cooler part of the water. Okay, it's
Yeah.
possible. Look at Rashi. Let's see what Rashi says before we'll leave it as we'll leave it as a question, but yeah, as what another
Okay.
possibility. Let's see how Rashi learns it.
Oh, I need to get the Gemara because I don't see the Rashi on
Oh
the...
yeah, I didn't give you the somebody else want to read. I actually updated the source a little bit. Did I give you the Rambam after this? No. No. All right. Yeah, I added some sources in my own additional research, but it's all right. Probably better to skip them. Yeah, Joel, what do you say?
I was gonna volunteer to read the Rashi, but
Okay, go ahead, Joel.
He says me'apech ba. I think it should be mevushal have bishul, right? So you're flipping it over, you're stirring it, and even though it's already cooked, it's still bishul, right? The stirring is like bishul achar bishul, essentially.
Right. Uma'apech ba. He stirs it and he flips it over, whatever that means exactly. He stirs it thoroughly. Ubemevushal have bishul, and it's almost like he's saying, even though it's already mevushal, there's still bishul, which is a bit, and it's almost like he says. Now the truth is the girsa that the Rosh bring, that when the Beit Yosef brings the Rosh, he brings a different girsa without the vav. So
yeah,
it's
I've got uvemevashel in my note in my Gemara. It says uvemevashel.
A note by whom? By you or by someone else?
No. That goes the sunim that Ozvadar stuck in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't have that Gemara, but I made my own girsa change because the Rosh brings it as ubimevashel have bishul, because it's very strange that he's saying bishul achar bishul here, because what's the difference between this case and the previous case? The previous case, it was bishul achar bishul, but what happened in between? And which didn't happen here.
Adding some kind of heat material.
And before the adding of the heat?
It cooled down.
It cooled down. It cooled down, and then you brought it back up to heating. So maybe that's what makes bishul achar bishul. But here it seems like the pot is hot, and it just stays hot. And nevertheless, Rashi is saying, b'mevushal have a bishul. In a thing that's cooked, there's bishul. So that's why the girsa is. That's why we don't like this girsa. It's problematic, and the Rosh actually quotes it as being ubimevashel have a bishul, which means like, and when you cook like this, it's bishul. Which means what? That it's not mivush. And then you could make an ukimta in Rashi. You could force Rashi to be saying that it's talking about wool that wasn't fully cooked, or that the water, maybe, I don't know, that it wasn't fully cooked, because then it's much easier to say that there's bishul achar bishul if the thing is still partially raw. But if it's mevushal, which implies it's fully cooked, it's hard to say there would still be bishul even if it's still hot. Anyway, these are all the things that the Beis Yosef talks about in this reading. The Rambam is inconclusive. The Shulchan Aruch, I'll just tell you what he says. The Shulchan Aruch in Siman Reish Nun Bet, Seif Aleph, he says that if you stir such a pot, even if it's off the fire, you're chayav mishum mivashel. He says clearly, you're chayav mishum mivashel, which is problematic because we'll see. He seems to say, yeah, there is bishul here. We'll see if that seems to contradict what we're about to learn. Okay. And then let's go to source 8. Is it source 8? Shabbat Kuf Mem Hey. This is also a very relevant source. Shabbat Kuf Mem Hey. It says like this. I'll read a little bit. This is Mishnah. Actually, maybe Alexi, you want to read? I see your face, so maybe you want to read.
Sorry, I was just checking something. Which Mishnah are we looking at right now?
Kuf Mem Hey.
Is the source sheet in here?
Source 8.
Okay, so Mishnah, what is this word supposed to be? Gachal? Right now it says Gimel Kaf Lamed.
It's Kol and it's just Mishnah.
Right, it's just
That's
the
what
Gimel.
now.
There we go. Kol Shabbat B'Chamin Me'erev
Sorry. Oh, I didn't. There was a gimel there. Oh, I
Yeah.
fixed my edition. I didn't fix yours.
Right. Kol Shabbat B'Chamin Me'erev Shabbat, Shorino B'Chamin B'Shabbat. So anything that has already been put into hot water before Shabbat, you can like soak it again in hot water on Shabbat. Kol Shelo B'Chamin Me'erev Shabbat, Madichino To B'Chamin B'Shabbat, Chutz Min HaMaliach HaYashan, V'Kuliyas HaIspanin Shehadachtan, Zohi Gmar Melachtan. But anything that has not been like soaked in hot water prior to Shabbos.
Right. So wait, let me just stop you for a second, because that's what it seems to say. Kol Shabbat B'Chamin, that was soaked in water, was in hot water. Rashi says, wait a second, Chamin, Kol Shabbat B'Chamin, Klomar Shenit Bashel, that was cooked. It actually doesn't just mean you put it in a pot of hot water and then just, you drop.
Although I think part of the notion is like if it's soaked in hot water, that is also considered to be like Zehu Bishulo, right? That like we think things, if it's like hot water,
it has to be there. We're talking about it being there for a sufficient time to cook it. It's not just like you drop a potato in hot water and you pull it out and now all of a sudden you got a different din. It was there and it was mivushal, Rashi says, and that makes sense.
Right. So things that were fully cooked before Shabbos, you can then put them in hot water again on Shabbos. You can even soak them. But something that wasn't like cooked in hot water before Shabbat, most foods, you can rinse them in hot water, but seemingly not soak them, except for these very salty, these old salted fish and these little salted fish and the special Kuliyas HaIspanin fish, right? That's its own.
According to, by the way, last time we looked at
salty fish.
Last time we looked at this, I was confused, but I was confused because Rashi's pshat is different. Rashi, this isn't Sograyim, and Rashi actually understands it as being a Maliach Yashan, which is, what does Rashi say? Wait a second.
Like some other old salted thing. But no, he says Dag Maliach Shel Shana She'avra. So a salty fish that's been salted for
exactly. And then what? But the other thing, the Aspanian, the Colis Aspanian is also a salted fish. It's not a raw fish.
But it seems to be, it seems like these are different types of salty fish.
Exactly, but they're all salty fish. Exactly.
Right, and they're all
last
ones.
Week we sort of said maybe it's raw fish. It says,
right,
but it says
you can't rinse them because the idea is seemingly that prior to rinsing them, they're inedible. Right, that like Rashi contrasts that with like basar chai. She's like, sorry,
not regular basar chai.
Basar yavesh.
No, not basar chai.
I said yavesh.
Yeah. Basar yavesh, dried meat, which is like almost like beef jerky. That you would eat it raw if you really had to, but you'd prefer to put it on salt water. And what's the din of that? In
that case, you're allowed to rinse it. You're not allowed to
exactly.
it, but you're allowed to rinse it. Whereas the really salty fish, seemingly they're not edible without being rinsed. And so the rinsing is actually like rendering them edible. And so in that case,
right. So when it says kol she ba b'chamin, when she didn't ba b'chamin, you can pour water on it. What only thing Rashi mentions is salted meat. It doesn't seem to say you could like pour hot water on strawberries, raw strawberries. So it might cook them. But the salted meat, you could. That's the example that he brings. And then he says the thing you can't do is salted fish, because that maybe does it, cooks it even more, cooks it a bit. But they didn't say that raw food you could pour hot water on. He said, if it's fully cooked, then you could put it in a pot of hot water. And if it's salted, then you could rinse it with hot water, unless it's a salted fish, basically. But there's no other cases, is what I'm saying. There's no case of like you could just like, because it's, if you read the Mishnah, you could just say anything that wasn't put in a pot, I can pour boiling water on it. But you can't, and right? And the Mishnah Berurah actually at the beginning in this Siman, he says about tea. his first words are, by tea, there is bishul. Almost like there's some kind of havamina that maybe there's just no bishul. It's not called bishul by tea for some reason. So, there's even tea leaves, let's say if they weren't cooked before, you pour hot water on them, that's cooking. Wait, are you guys frozen? Am I frozen? Oh, yeah, Joel.
I think some of that's
Wait,
going to come down to this, the question of, do we categorize things in general as, shelo ba b'chamin, or do we categorize them as the kulios and the maliyah hayashan, right? That's does tea fall into the second?
What else fits in that category?
Yeah, exactly. Does tea, which category for any
I'm
object?
gonna read it in a very, right.
Yeah.
But tea is shorin, not medichin, right?
Well, whatever. If you, okay, whatever.
Well, the question,
but shorin is also in a kli rishon. You're right. Medichin would be.
Yeah. So the question.
It's a whole big topic. That's a whole big topic, Ori.
Yeah.
Because there are some. Rabbeinu Tam says that if you pour hot water from a kli rishon, that's like putting it in a kli rishon, and therefore, according to Rabbeinu Tam, we have to learn this Gemara as you put it into a kli sheni and then pour it from a kli sheni. But if you don't learn like Rabbeinu Tam, then it would mean that you could pour it directly from a kli rishon, and then you could certainly put it in a kli sheni. So you could make your tea in a kli sheni for sure, according to this, if you held that some reason tea was like dried meat. And I wouldn't go that far. I would say all I have the right to permit here is the example that he gave. Because it's a very specific example, and it's hard to imagine anything else being categorically the same.
Can I just say back what you said, that medichin is, so you're comparing shorin to
what?
You're comparing medichin to kli sheni?
Well, if you can pour hot water on it, then you can certainly, pouring hot water is considered closer to kli rishon than kli sheni. So, in other words, the first level is kli rishon. Second level is pouring from kli rishon. The third level is kli sheni. Anything that I'd permitted to do for pouring, I'm certainly permitted to do in a kli sheni.
Right. But there's that, you're just making that connection that, like, I could have read the Mishnah where it had to do with the amount of time. Like medichin sounded to me, at least on first read, like it was a quick rinse as opposed to sitting in it for longer. But I see the general. I know it's not achad al achad, but it's a general.
You're right. You could read it that way.
Is like doing that, or kli shlishi is like doing that. Like it turns into a temperature conversation.
Perhaps it's also a valid way to look at it. All right, we let Lexi finish this Gemara here. We finished the Gemara
here. Okay, Kagon, my Amar of Safra, Kagon Tar Nagolta, Rabbi Abba. The Amar of Safra, Zimna Chada, Iklait Lahatam, V'ochlim.
Wait, so what was the question? Kagon Mai.
So the Kagon Hai seems to be, what are we dealing the Baba Chamin? What are the types of foods that we're talking about? Like, give us an example of the thing. Presumably, since it's the first part in the Gemara, it's giving us an example of the first clause, right? So Rashi says, like, Baba Chamin, Shechozrin v'shorin shabachamin. Exactly. It's on the first clause. What is the type of food that we say has already been Baba Chamin, has already been in this hot water, and therefore can then be returned to the hot water? So they say, it's like the chicken of Rabbi Abba. Which apparently, according to Rashi, he would cook and like soak for many days, in order to sort of, dissolve it a little. And he would eat it for, health, apparently. So that kind of thing has been cooked and almost dissolved, and that kind of thing you could put back in. So that's pretty dramatically limiting the example here.
Presuming it's dry.
Yes, but I'm saying that like it seems, at least the way Rashi is explaining this, that it's giving an example of something that is like intensively cooked and also extensively soaked, and he's like, it's basically dissolving already. That's the kind of thing that you can put back in the really hot water.
Yeah,
And
exactly. So
Rav
again,
said-
a very limited example. Wait, I want to stop here. I don't mean to cut you off, but I want to stop here, and that's enough of the source sheet. I want to go now to the tour, just because we have so little time, and the work is long. My connection to the internet is unstable, so I hope it lasts. Where are we? So we're in Daled in the Shulchan Aruch, in the tour, sorry. And I think we read this last time, but yeah, but we can read it again quickly. I'll read it again. Afilu tavshu dit pashel kfar. So that's like this chicken of Rabbi Abba. Yesh bo mishum bishul when im nitztanen kfar. If it got cold, aval bodo roteach lo. So that's the distinction that we saw between the yora of the wool, where there's no, well, presumably there shouldn't be bishul unless you say it's not fully cooked, but because it's kept warm. But by the case of the tomnin, if you let it get cold, even though, so again, he talked about it's fully cooked. You have bishul if it got cold and you heat it up again. V'im lo nitpashel called sarko. But if it wasn't fully cooked, it was cooked somewhat, enough to be eaten. Then, like that could be the case of the wool. The wool where it's still, you still can cook it, even though it's still hot, is because it's not fully cooked. It's only by liquids. Something that's dry, and that's the case that Lexi just read to us. Something that's dry, like the chicken of Rabbi Abba, and it's already fully cooked. Mutar lishroto b'chamin b'Shabbat. Tanan kol Shabbat b'chamin l'fnei Shabbat. Perush bashel. Exactly Rashi, right? Shenit bashel kvar, like Rashi says. It doesn't mean it just soaked, it means it was cooked. It doesn't mean it was put in hot water for a minute. Shorin oto b'chamin, umuki lo b'tarnagol of Rabbi Abba. And we say that that's talking about this case of a fully cooked chicken, called sarko. Shenit bashel called sarko. V'haita yavesha. And it was dry. It wasn't like, it was a mush, but a dry mush, I don't know. It was like powdered, I don't know. V'kol shelo ba b'chamin lifnei Shabbat, and anything that didn't come into chamin, ein shorin oto b'chamin b'Shabbat dechashiv k'mevashel, aval madichin oto b'chamin chutz mimeliach hayashan v'kulias ha'ispan, except for these fish. Perush dag katan she'en tzrichim ele bishul ma'at. So the problem is a little bit, what does he mean? Rashi said, he seems to say anything that wasn't cooked, but it can't be. Okay, let's look at the Beit Yosef. Now, a second. Yeah, let's start. I think we read the beginning a little bit here. Yeah, let's start where it says Vilamai, the perished. You see that in the Beit Yosef? Vilamai, the perished. It's like, it's not so far into the beginning. It's like about it's about a paragraph's worth of words. It's not a new paragraph, but Ulamai depirished de lo shayach bishul betavshil shinit bashel. See that?
Add depreciate. Ulamai depreciate.
Yeah, depreciate. Sorry, depreciate. Yeah. All right, Ori, you got it. So I'll let you read.
Great. Ulamai depreciate. The lo shaykh bishul betavshil shnit bashel. Lo takshe hadam rinam beperek b'mem adlikim. De'en tomnim b'davar she'ena mosif hevel. Mishachashecha. Gzer Hashem yartiach. Okay, so for what we explained, that this bishul with bishul achar bishul, something that's already cooked. This is not difficult with that other Gemara about ein tomnim,
which we just read, which seems to say that you're worried that you're going to boil it up. Hatam
lav mishum bishul el mishum shema yechateh. That's just because you might stoke the coals.
Oh, so this is the Rosh. I didn't tell you. I didn't warn you. This is the Rosh talking. He's quoting the Rosh. So Rosh learns not like Rashi. He says it's not because it's because there's bishul achar bishul. There is no bishul achar bishul. You hear this? There's no bishul achar bishul. It's because you're going to start messing with, like we said, the other way of reading it. Maybe you may be going to mush around the coals, and you're going to mamish do havara. You're going to make lighting a fire. That's the problem. So that's the Rosh. And now the Rosh is going to address Rashi. He doesn't really stick to his opinion. He immediately quotes Rashi and basically doesn't argue with Rashi, as far as I can tell. So read on. For Rashi,
Rashi perish le'il gzera shema yartiach kedera shenitztanena k'shir tzela hatmina v'yartichena betchila ba'or nimtza mevashel b'Shabbat. So Rashi says it's a gzera that you might boil that pot that was already cooled when you want to bury it or cover it.
Right, like we read. So go on.
Okay, nimtza mevashel b'Shabbat. Parich ihachi ben hashmashot nigzor dehashvut me'al yahu. And who asks, Rashi or Beit Yosef?
No, the Gemara. He's just repeating the Gemara for us now.
If so, ben hashmashot nigzor dehashvut me'al yahu. Deha'ika gezera isur de'oraita. But this gezera would also be an isur de'oraita.
In other words, the Gemara asked, let us also forbid it bein hashmashot, right? Because not mishachashecha when it's for sure Shabbat. Let's ligzor even bein hashmashot because it's a good gezerah because we have a real chashash of deraita that you are going to be boiling. Okay.
V'chein beperek kama deparech gabei yore akura v'halo megis u'perish Rashi u'v'mashel hari bishul. So
here's where the Girsa.
Yeah, he quotes it without mevushal. He
doesn't say mevushal. He says ubimevashel have a bishul. So in other words, there the Gemara says that there's bishul. Umidvarav, and now he's gonna. The Rosh is now summarizing Rashi, or the halachic learning from Rashi.
Midvarav lamanu she'af b'tavshil shenitbashel v'nitztanen shayach v'zeh bishul. Right, so we learned from Rashi here that even if something was cooked and it cooled, it's still bishul.
So this is like a very important din. That's what I'm saying. They say this is the reason why we eat cholent, right? It's something that you can't take goulash and put it on the plata, even if it's fully cooked, because if cold goulash, is, let's say, we'll see maybe possibility for a heter there, but let's say in general, something that's a liquid, it's chicken soup. You can't take chicken soup from the refrigerator and heat it up on your plata, even if you've got a cover on your plata and the dials are covered and there's a sign saying, this is not an oven or whatever chumrah you want to have, you put it, you can't do it because it's a liquid and it was cold.
Nachum, did you explain to me the difference of the form of the two possible derachim in terms of why they what's the nature of each derech as opposed to each other?
In the Rosh and Rashi?
Here. Rosh and Rashi. It would seem to me, maybe you said already, it seemed to me that we have one chashash that the very act itself is problematic, meaning the act itself is a form of bishul, and the other one seems to be that it leads to an act of definite bishul.
Well, no, I think the Rosh is saying, Rashi is saying that it's bishul, and the Rosh is saying it is not bishul. You can take chicken soup and put it on the fire, or put it on a covered fire on Shabbat, or put it on a plata, whatever the rules are. We didn't discuss that, but put it on a plata, you could. And the only thing the Gemara was saying is don't stir around coals. Is worried that you're going to stir around coals. As long as you have no coals there, or it's, as long as there's no coals there, then it would be permitted. The Gemara was talking about a case where there were coals there. By the way, I actually believe that modern ovens, why did you stir the coals? Because if you didn't, it would eventually get cooler and cooler because it gets covered with soot. And even if the coal is there burning, it really burns at a very low temperature because it doesn't get much oxygen. So you have to stir it to keep the temperature at a constant rate.
So you're saying is that the stirring is a reigniting.
Yeah, so the stirring is a reigniting, and the Rosh says that's the fear. But bishul acher bishul ain't kazeh davar. There is no such thing as bishul acher bishul.
Right. So if you're worried, okay, we'll leave it at that.
But that's a huge, an arrow in your quiver. I mean, there's the opinion of the Rosh. You have an opinion of a Rishon that there's no bishul acher bishul, even by liquids.
How does the Rosh read the wool case?
What?
The wool case? How does the Rosh read the wool case without bishul acher
Oh,
bishul?
you're gonna see. He's gonna address it. He's gonna address it. If we get there. So anyway, but according to Rashi, umidavarav lamadnu sha'af b'tav shenitpashel v'nitztanen shayich bishul kevan sheyesh bo mashke, because it has a liquid there. Then there is a din of bishul, unlike what I hold, says the Rosh. Now, I'll read a little bit. V'hada amrina and dekol shabbat b'chamim milifnei Shabbat shorino to b'chamim b'Shabbat hainu devar yavesh. That's only by a solid thing, according to Rashi. That you could put it into cold water, but liquids you couldn't put a cold liquid into a hot liquid and heat it up. Could go and targol to Rabbi Abba, prepare a kavit. Venira li lahaviraya ledevarav, and he's going to support Rashi. This is very strange. I mean, the Rosh said his own opinion, and now he's going to say, but I'm going to bring a proof for Rashi. Viraya ledevarav meditanya beperech amevi kadeyayin, where it talks about this in this chapter here, because there's a case here that I didn't actually assign, but echad mevi ha'or ve'echad mevi et ha'etzim. It's like a case where like a lot of people are involved in cooking on Shabbat. One brings the wood, and one brings the fire, one brings the pot and the water, and the one stirs it, and the whole process of making a cup of tea, and everybody is chayiv. And what do we learn from this? V'kulam chayavim. You see where it says that kulam chayavim. But wait a second, the one who put the water in is nitchayev mishum mivashel. He's already, so there's already bishul been done. And yet the one who stirs it is also chayev. But why should he be chayev? You can't be chayev. Once you've found the din of bishul, it's done. The one person who put the water, he did bishul. How can you say another person is also chayev for the same act? The act is finished. He did bishul. So how is stirring bishul? So what do we see from this case? Alma, we see yesh bishul acher bishul. Even though the first one was already chayev on bishul, the second one is chayev on bishul. There's bishul acher bishul, and of course that's also a case of a liquid. Afal pi shelo nitztanen, and that's even a case where it didn't get cold. So now we have to explain that. Now, Rashi just said if it gets cold and you heat it up, then it's bishul. What about here, this Gemara? You understand the question that it presents us with now? That if you're saying that it didn't mitztanen, so why are you chayav? That shouldn't be chayav. Rashi never said that. Except if by the wool, maybe he did, according to how you read that, how whatever. It depends how you understand the wool case. If the wool case was semi-cooked or fully cooked. But anyway, that's going to be relevant. Okay, let's go on. You could force the ad shelo nitbashel kemachal ben drosai kol hamikarev bishulo chayev. You might say that as long as it wasn't fully cooked, and maybe the water case of boiling the tea and it wasn't fully cooked, and as long as it wasn't fully cooked, kol the mikarev bishulo chayev. I like those words. Anybody who brings closer the bishul is also chayev. So therefore, the stirrer is chayev. But that's only where it's shalonit bashel kamachal ben drosai. It's only a tiny bit cooked. But once it's barely edible, then there's no bishul acher bishul. But in that interim state, in the state, that's my chart. If you saw on the thing that I sent you, that's the chart. Like if it's under bachal ben drosai, then there's bishul acher bishul, but after not. And then Rashi was talking about and that case maybe. I mean, not the case of the cold. But the case of the wool, maybe it wasn't fully cooked. You could say, well, wool, we're about to see why is wool considered not machal ben drosai? Why is that? Maybe it's fully cooked. You don't really cook wool. I don't know. But maybe the water. Why is that? We will see. We'll see. Mustabra da ad shelo hagia lemachal ben drosai kol hamikarev bishulo chayev va'achar shehagia lemachal ben drosai im nitztanen. Oh, then if it got cold, once it's beyond the threshold of, let's say, a third cooked, and it got cold, ve'herticho, and you will eat it up, chayev k'deperish Rashi, like Rashi. Gabe shema yartiach, which when Rashi said shema yartiach, not like me, the Rosh says, not like me who says that it's shema, you'll move the coals around. V'ha deparik beperekama v'halo magis afilu biyora rotachat. Ikadememar saman. Here's the question that Ori had and that we all had. Samanin litzboa behen tzarich bishul leolam. That the spices, in other words, the cooking is of the samanim. It's not of the wool. It's of the samanim in the pot that you're cooking with the wool, and you're trying to get the spices to impregnate the wool with their dye, and they always can get more cooked. So if it's infinitely cookable, then you'll never get to a level of a third, because there's no such thing as a third of infinity. If it can be cooked forever, then I'll never get to machal ben drosai. So as I keep cooking, I never got a third cooked. It can be infinitely cooked. I never got anywhere close to infinity. So therefore what? Therefore, it's still in the category of being chayev on bishul because it's not kamachal ben drosai yet. Joel, you have a question?
No, maybe this is getting us a little bit astray, but I was wondering, the guy who brings the water, right, in the case in Beitza, right, where the thing, it's high, and he hasn't gotten into machal ben drosai, he puts it in there, and the guy who stirs it brings it further. That mean, at what point does the guy who brings the water become chayev, right? Because, it's like anybody who is bringing it to roteach, even if it's not machal ben drosai, is that the point of chiyuv? So like you become chayev once you get it to roteach.
Water, yeah. Water is not samanim, so water would be chayev, at machal. No, well, he said, as long as it's under machal ben drosai, then any act, you could have 100 people chayev of bishul. If I take it off the fire and put it back on, and then somebody else comes along, every act of getting it closer to machal ben drosai is chayev.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess the question is that if I put the water on the fire, right? Yeah. And then you stir it, or whatever this is, right?
I helped cook that water.
You help cook it, but I am also chayev as long as it makes it eventually to machal ben drosai. Is that the idea?
No, no, that's not what he said. He said, "Kol hamikarev bishulo chayev."
Yeah.
If you didn't get there, as long as you're mikarev.
But if I put the water on the fire and then I'm like, my intention was to take it off immediately, it wasn't going to get hot, or just to
Then
like,
you're not chayiv, right?
yeah, that's why I'm just curious about how that person still stays chayiv in the Rosh's structure.
Right. I
So,
guess it has to be that it eventually does reach Machal ben Drosai.
yeah.
And then anybody who did kiruv of it is chayiv.
Or you could say it reaches anything between roteach and machal ben drosai, right? If I get it, you have to get it at least to roteach to be chayav, and anything between roteach and machal ben drosai, you stay being chayav as you keep increasing it to machal. Anything between roteach and because obviously I put it on the fire and it heats up to 90 degrees. I don't know. No one cares. You care maybe, but like it's not. You haven't violated anything from Shabbos. So.
All right, we're getting too far afield. Got to get
Yeah.
back.
Okay. All right. Fair enough.
Okay. But the Rosh doesn't like this infinity question because it's a bit of a weird answer. Like, because it's infinity, it never gets to Machal ben Drosai. So then he says, Inam, he gives an alternative answer. Lav mishum bishul parich, el mishum soveya. And there's the other answer that the Rosh gives. It's soveya is the issue. Kishu magis machnis samamnin bitsemer. He puts the dye better into the wool when he stirs it.
This is what I was waiting for, because that's how I read that Gemara in the first place too. It's the stirring there. It's not similar. It's different in that way, that it's a stirring case.
Right. So the Rosh says, but again, this is all according to Rashi. Because he says it's stirring the coals, but he says Rashi we could explain. Or we could explain the Gemara that you're chayiv. Not. It's not. It's like according to what's mistaber, but still saying that there's some kind of bishul going on there. I don't know if it's according to Rashi, because Rashi had a different explanation. But remember, he did say that the problem is the coals.
But the Rosh for the Semer and the Yorek has to think that it's not about the coals, because it's a kura, right, at that point. So he has to think it's either about.
Oh, you mean the other case, the third case, yeah. Right. Okay, let me just read a little bit more, then we'll take a break, because this is a good place to stop. Venira, and here he's going to sort of conclude. Venira de lamai de masik dafka benitztanen verticho chayiv. That which we said, that if it gets cold and then you get it hot, then you're chayiv. Ha'im hayaroteach lo. That means if it was hot the whole time, you're not chayiv. Kevan shekvar egia lemachal ben drosai. Once it's reached machal ben drosai. Lefi zeh have le'Rabbeinu. Who's le'Rabbeinu? The Tur. Lefi zeh have le'Rabbeinu. The Tur lifso kedemasik harosh. This is the Beit Yosef talking. I should have said, when it says for Nira, that until there was Adkan Lashon HaRosh. Now is the Beit Yosef talking. And he says, it comes out, according to everything we just said, like the Rosh, that until Machal ben Drosai, so it says, Lefi zeh, havele letur, l'Rabbeinu letur, lifsok kedemasik harosh, de mishegia lemachal ben Drosai, im nitztanen v'ticho chayev, k'mo shekatav b'Ramazim, like he wrote in the Kitzer, in v'hu katav kan, dafilu bodoroteach shayach bo bishul. Let's look at that again. What did the Tur say? He said in the beginning, afilu tavshish nitbashel kfar yesh bo mishum bishul im nitztanen kfar ava ba'odo roteach lo. It's still hot low. But,
yeah, but keep
it
going.
should have been chayev. Even if it's still hot, because of it's as long as it's not machal ben drosai.
That's what he says in the next line, right? That's the next line.
So wait, so what's this question? I got.
Because it says afilu be'odorateach, but in the Kitzur Piskei Rosh, right, which supposedly was written by the Tur, he says that according to the Rosh, even if it's
I want a simple question. Where is the machloket between the Tur and the Rosh?
It's right there. Afilu be'otoroteach.
Where does the tour say odoroteach?
In right, it says v'im lo nitpashel kol tzarko, afilu nitpashel kemachal ben drosai, shayach bo bishul afilu.
The next one. V'im lo nitpashel kol tzarko.
Yeah.
Afilu nitpashel kemachal ben drosai. Shayach bo bishul afilu be'odoroteach. And that's, in other words, even if it's still hot and it's already machal ben drosai, since it's not fully cooked, there's shayach bo bishul. And that's not like the Rosh. The Rosh would say machal ben drosai is the cutoff, and the Tur is saying the cutoff is fully cooked. And that's the way we're going to paskin. Not like the Rosh. We're going to like the Tur. The more machmir opinion. In other words, and it really doesn't make sense, the machal ben drosai. Because if it's machal ben drosai, it just means it's a third cook, but it doesn't mean it can't be cooked more. So obviously you can cook it more. You should be chayav on the cooking more. Right? Why would all of a sudden the fact that it's machal ben drosai? But there isn't, whatever. The argument is basically, how can you be chayav twice on one cooking? If you cooked it, if you're chayav once it reached machal ben drosai, then you should be putter from there on. Another person should be putter from there on, says the Rosh. But the Tur says, no, there can be many people chayav on the same cooking. Or you have a question?
Isn't it just, I'm just trying to not simplify, but organize. Essentially, in all the opinions, there is a threshold for what is quote unquote cooked. It's just that the threshold is in different places.
Yeah.
The machal ben drosai.
But I was just saying that fully cooked is a logical place, more than machal ben drosai.
But you're saying fully cooked as if that's an objectively agreed upon thing, and it really isn't. The machal ben drosai is a type of fully cooked because it's now edible. But it clearly changes, you're thinking it clearly changes form more than that, like the Tur. So machal ben drosai can't be the cutoff. Yavesh should be the cutoff in the Tur, if I'm not mistaken.
And I'll tell you even worse. What about mitstamek feralo? So there's such a thing, or mitstamek v'yafelo.
Exactly.
There could be fully
Yavesh
cooked.
isn't the most machmir, right? Yavesh
there could be fully cooked, and then it still could be cooked more. It's fully cooked, but it's mitstamek v'yafelo. It gets better if you cook it, overcook it.
Right. So we have in our language what's overcooked, what's cooked. But I think what the Rishonim are sort of duking out is what should be a bishul, at least for the sake of bishul, a cutoff. Is that fair to say? Because I'm trying to organize a little bit in my own mind.
Well, I think that you can say that there's such a thing where if you ask a French chef, when should I take this potato out of the oven? I'm taking the example of a potato, which you could theoretically cook forever almost. But the French chef will say, now is the time to take it out. If you take it out in 5 more minutes, it's going to be mushy. It's going to be overcooked. This is the moment. In fact, I think Rabbi Landis, you'll tell me the name. There's a famous cook, Bard, or New York Times cookbook, Bard. I forget his name. Beard, maybe Beard.
Yeah,
Beard.
James Beard.
James Beard, yeah. I think that he holds that a chicken is fully cooked when it's still pink. Like it should be a little bit pink when you take it out of the oven.
Right.
And I would never want it like that. But in other words, I think that expert chefs have an idea. This is the moment of cooked, fully cooked. More than that, you're ruining it. Less than that, it's not ready. There's one moment.
Right, but my kids like mushy pasta, and it's past al dente.
They like overcooked food.
But so it's a machloket maybe about the heart of bishul. Is bishul the first step? I think according to the Rosh, if I'm not mistaken, the first step of changing it is now bishul, not the last one, right? Because assumedly there's like 3 different places to stop many types of things from being cooked. And then in the most, I don't know who the most machmir is, where you could even mistamek v'tovlo. That's much farther.
Right. Yeah, there's different places. All right, let's take a break here. Here, can you put back your food? Maybe what we said, if it's gonna get worse or get better, that matters. The food is gonna if it's fully cooked, but what about if it's worse or better? So let's look, you skip ahead in the tour where it says Vahada Amrinan. I mean, I hope, yeah, I think this is good stuff. I think this is,
Rav Nachum, do you say in the tour?
sorry, I mean in the Beit Yosef.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we read the Seif in the tour. We were still in Beit Yosef. This Siman is important to do in the Beit Yosef because it's got a lot of opinions, and they're relevant so that you can, know where you can push and shove the halacha a little bit. Okay, so people have it.
Rav Nachum, is that Bahad Amrinan the Tav Shil Shani Bashel Kol Tzarko? That's where we are?
Exactly.
Okay.
You got it, Ruben. I'll read it. I think because I read faster than anybody else because, but maybe that's bad. I don't know. Hada Amrinan, the Tavshil, Shenit Bashel called Sarkov, and it's Stanen, Yeshbo Mishum Bishel. That's what we said, that if it gets cold and then you heat it up again, that's Bishel. Im Yeshbo Rotev, but that's of course only if there's Rotev, says the tour. That's the tour says like that. Katvo Smak, the Smak said it also. V'zel Shona. And here we're now quoting the Smak. Umiyu b'davar lach v'tzalul, chicken soup. L'divrei hakol yesh bishul achar bishul. Here we have bishul achar bishul. La'achar shenitztaneh. Im chozer umarticho. If you let it get cold and heat it up again. Kedamrin have a parak b'mei madlikin shema yartiach kedeperish shamba kuntras. Like Rashi said. So the Smak is saying Rashi bishul achar bishul. Great. Adkan. Mashma da'afilu shenitbashel kol tzarko, even if it's fully cooked, aser tistam kederot kishe matmininan matminin otan. Because when we cover them with blankets, we don't do that unless it's fully cooked. We assume if you're going to cover with blankets, it's probably going to be something that was fully cooked. You're not going to take raw, semi-raw food and rely on a hatmana to keep cooking it. And yet you see that the continuation of the bishul is usher, so therefore heating something up that was cold is forbidden even if it's fully cooked. V'ken katav Rabbeinu Yerucham, and so says Rabbeinu Yerucham. But Rabbeinu Yerucham is going to add another little twist. B'chelik Gimel v'zel Lashona, and here's the quote: Ki kol davar shenitztanen afilu mivushal kol tzarko v'yesh bo rotev umitztamek v'yafelo. That's the twist. And so we have two conditions: it has to be liquid, and the cooking of it has to improve it. Yesh bo mishum bishul. Then we have bishul. Wait a second. So that implies that if it doesn't improve it, even though it has some liquid in it, it's permitted, says Rabbeinu Yerucham. Right? It's only if it's mitstamek v'yafa, though. It gets intensified by the cooking and gets better. Lefichach ein manichim oto kol kach samuch lemedura b'makom shayad soledet bo ela merachok. You have to keep a pot far away from the fire. Shelo tiyeh yad soledet bo, so it should never get too hot. Ad kan l'shono. That's Rabbeinu Yerucham. V'ken katav od b'shem harav Rabbeinu Yonah. He also quotes Rabbeinu Yonah, basically saying the same thing. V'zeh l'shono kol zed sha'amarnu she'machzirin davka she'egia l'machal ben drosai afilu hegia im shahab odo b'yado ad shenitztanen. If it's in your hand and it got cold, asur lachziro, you can't put it back. Im yesh ba rotev. The kol davar sheyesh ba rotev umitztamek v'yafelo, and it gets better by cooking further. V'hutzonen, and it's now called k'shechziro al gabei akira u'mitztamek havim mivasha gamur adkan. That's bishul, even though it's fully cooked, but it cooked more. This kind of addresses what we were talking about before the break, that something can be fully cooked. That doesn't mean you can't cook it more, and that's the concept of mitztamek v'yafelo, as opposed to mitztamek v'ralo. And there's a Gemara and Daf Lamed Zayin in the Gemara that talks about mitztamek v'yafelo and mitztamek v'ralo, and I believe that over there it's talking only about liquids, and I think that or like a food like a goulash or something, but something that's dry. By definition, it's not mitztamek v'tovlo. In other words, something that's dry is always mitztamek v'ralo, and therefore it's permitted. Joel.
I wanted to ask if we could make something of the fact that the smak, right, says devar lach v'salul versus devar sheyesh bo rotev, right? Those seem like two slightly different things. I don't know if he's being some mediac in the smak.
I mean, you could, but nobody does.
Yeah, I know. That's why I was curious why nobody does, I guess, is the question. Like, am I missing
Well, there is
something?
one place in my source sheet that there is somebody does make something of it. And if you look at my source sheet, since you ask, and I have no better time to talk about it than now, look at source 10. If you have source sheet, I actually come to class with two computers, one to see you guys and the other one with my source sheet. That way I can look at them separately. Look at source 10. Everyone has source 10 there? It's the Beit Yosef again, but it's Reish Nun Gimel, which is our brother or our sister Siman, to this Siman. And he says like this, Masha Katav Rabbeinu, which is the tour, Kol Zman Shehi Rotachat, Ken Mashma Vadai She'im Shaha Biyado. This is talking about like returning a cholent pot to the plata. De'im Shaha Biyado Ad Shenitztanen Tavshil. If it was in your hand and it got cold, or even whatever cold is, probably less than Yad Soledet. According to him, the Ramah holds different. But anyway, according to him, it's less than Yad Soledet. Nitztanen Tavshil. Asr zero mishum dahavele kemevashel. You can't put it back now because it got cold, and that's the whole thing that we learned. V'ken katav Rabbeinu b'siman shin yudchet, our siman. V'ken katav Rabbeinu Yerucham b'chelik gimel b'shem ri, or b'shem Rabbeinu Yonah maybe. Dekol shirubo rotev u'mitztamek v'yafelo v'hutzonen k'shech zero al gabei akiro mitztamek v'havim mivashel gamur, because it's going to get more samich, it's going to get more intensified in the flavor. Therefore, it's bishul totally. But notice that he says these words, dekol sherubo rotev, which means which lakula you could say. What would be the kula here? If it's kol sherubo rotev. But what if it's a miut rotev? What about if it's like mostly meat and a little bit of sauce?
And it was still
it's mutter.
stomach v'yafela?
Then even if it's with stomach v'yafelo, it could be mutter. You could say, even if it's with stomach v'yafelo, because it's not liquid really, it's rubo. It's a big question, because he doesn't say this rubo thing in our Siman, or I don't think in the Shulchan Aruch anywhere. This is the Beit Yosef. So there's a machloket among the Sephardi poskim between Rav Mashash, and who's the Moroccan, and Rav Avadia, who's Mekel, who's Iraqi, who holds. So the Iraqi hold that they take this literally. As long as it's mostly yavesh, you could put it back on the plata. But the Rav Mashash holds no. This is not taken literally. It's not paskent.
I mean,
But,
Rabbeinu Yonah uses the
I think
language.
that addresses what you were saying.
Yeah, a little
In other
bit, yeah.
words-
Rabbeinu Yonah uses the language of Yeshbo Rotev, right? I think is what he is, Yeshba Rotev, right? Which sounds like he has any Rotev almost in Rabbeinu Yonah's world. But,
Right, and the other is salul. Salul is really like soup.
that's what I was thinking is like versus the goulash case, right? That soup, soup is like clearly asur to
Right,
the
goulash
smack.
is not salul.
Exactly, that's the thing. So that might be mutar in the smock's world, right? I don't know if anyone paskins that way, but you know.
Well, I'm
still,
saying the Beit Yosef seems to be paskening like that.
Yeah.
Okay, or it seems to be bringing that up as the halacha. I don't know. Okay, that's the source sheet. That's why I looked for that because I know this psak and I wanted to find where he says that, and that's an important look. Like you know, good luck finding that. But there it is. Okay. So where were we? Ad Khan. So he just quoted Rabbeinu Yonah. I'm going to say like this: in this Siman, there's no difference between the tour. Sorry, the who is quoting? We're actually Rabbeinu. Yeah, who are we quoting here? Who the Smak I think is quoting Rabbeinu Yerucham and Rabbeinu Yonah, and he doesn't see any difference between them. V'hutzonen. Okay, where were we? V'hutzonen. Ad Khan. You see where it says Ad Khan? Lamadu medivarav de'im itztamek v'ralo. So here's his diuk. We learned from his words, Rabbeinu Yerucham and even Rabbeinu Yonah, that if it's mistamek v'ralo, you know, it's just getting worse by cooking. It's getting overcooked. Afal pi sheyesh bo marak, even though there's some sauce there, ein bo mishum bishul, because it's mistamek v'ralo. V'shari litno etzel medora afilu b'makom sheyazaru. You can even
Can I ask you a
get it
question?
really hot.
Mitztamek viralo. What's an example of that? Is that like when your chicken is overcooked and it tastes like rubber? It's like rubber.
It's just
I don't
like
think so.
burning or it's crisping up in a way that like will be gross, as opposed to like some things get a little crispy and it's actually really nice and you're like, oh, it's an extra little bit of toastedness, versus others you're just like, it's burning. This is making this less edible.
I think
mean, you
I
have
think
to
it's
think of a
I
case where
think
there's
it's
rotative.
relative.
If it's
it's-
dry, then it's always going to be mutter. So we're
Yeah,
only
but
talking about a
you
case where
could
there's
have,
rotative.
like, imagine like the rotev like crusting on the thing, right? It's not getting like, it's not really thick and like becoming like a little more caramelized. It's just like burnt on the bottom of the pan.
Gotcha.
Why do we have to go that far? Ralo means it's worse than what you had before. It's
Yes.
already ralo.
Or even that
I
it's
don't think it has to be so extreme.
I agree with you, Rabbi Linus. It's anything that lowers the quality of the food that I would have preferred it less cooked. If there's a certain point where your cholent is ready, and if you cook it more, maybe it gets a little worse.
I think
you
I'm the
see
wrong
that-
person for this
And
because
that's
I
the
think all
problem with
cholent
the
is bad.
Kids who
Um,
want a burnt piece of kugel, that's the problem. But
yeah, but the kugel is dry, so we've already established the kugel is
right, okay. You're right. A juicy piece of meat, they like a little burnt, but that's kids.
Well, it could be chicken soup. Sometimes chicken soup, if you cook it too long, it gets so strong that it's not nice anymore. You'd have to add water to it. I mean, I cook chicken soup, and you cook it for a long time. You have to add water as you're cooking it because it boils off. And if you wouldn't add water to it because you couldn't because of Shabbos, then if you would put chicken soup all day and eat it and eat it Shabbos morning, I tell you, it's not going to be very good.
fair enough.
I've actually tried it. You don't want chicken soup the next day.
No,
So
I don't.
Are you positing that if I have soup that's already been cooked perfectly, that if I put it on the blech now, it's only going to get worse? I'm allowed to heat it up?
I'm not paskening. I'm saying
I
that's
know,
what
but
Rabbeinu
it's
Yonah. That's what Rabbeinu Yonah and Rabbeinu Yerucham would probably say.
And I think
even if it's a little worse,
you
right?
can
It doesn't have
pass
to be
it this
ruined.
way for Teimanim.
For certainly the Rambam, we're going to see the Rambam in a minute now, but the Rambam holds totally lakula. And that's the way the Teimanim paskin, right? But anyway, we just saw the diuk. The diuk is that it's if mitztamek v'ralo, it should be permitted. Like I said, this is all very important stuff. Where are we?
Rav Nachum.
Yeah.
I just want to say the Aruch HaShulchan, I hadn't looked at this. He thinks that if it is mitzamek v'ralo, because you can, also have the Rambam sitting in the background, which you're about to do, that maybe it is permissible. Because he said you're just heating at that point, you're not cooking. And even if it's Psik Reisha, it's because of the Rambam, and we don't have to worry about it. Psik Reisha is a little anechale, and you have the Rambam. So I don't know. Maybe the Aruch HaShulchan would hold, if your chicken soup is completely cooked and it's just getting worse, maybe that's okay.
I think that's basically the Ramah in that I forget, maybe it's the Igrot Moshe who says that he's like the Ramah holds his opinion, right? The fact that like if something hasn't been cooled down all the way, or if it's mitzamek viralo, even if it's liquidy, that it's permitted. He says it's like because Me'ikr Hadin, he actually agrees that ain bishul achar bishul, right? That like he like that, and I think you could dispute this, but like he thinks the Ramah is essentially making chumras on that rather than kulas on yesh bishul achar bishul.
Wait a minute, wait.
Okay,
You're saying that Rav
agree.
Moshe holds that ain bishul achar bishul?
No, that he's explaining what he thinks that the Ramah, he thinks that the Ramah, Me'ikr Hadin, believes ain bishul achar bishul, and that the stances of like, oh, if it isn't fully cooled down, you can put it, or if it needs to make viralo, you can do it. That in those cases, like those are essentially chumras on believing ain bishul achar bishul rather than kulas on believing yesh bishul achar bishul.
I just want to add that, I agree. I want to add that when it comes to soup, just practically now speaking, for Ashkenazim, it's a bridge too far.
Right. No, nobody actually does that.
It is a bridge too far.
Right. But if you, right, I mean, I'm saying theoretically that soup does get worse, but I mean, maybe goulash gets worse. I don't know. You'd have to.
No, goulash gets better.
It's actually a subjective din. Again, if you look at the Gemara in Shabbos Lamed Zayin, I believe, they say, look, if you're having guests, so then you don't want it to, even though mitzamek v'yafelo because it's getting tastier, but it's really ralo because he wants it bigger pieces. He doesn't want it. He got a lot of guests coming. He wants a larger portions. He'd rather have it be bigger. So you see from that mitzamek v'ralo is subjective. It depends on the circumstance. Am I having guests? Am I not having guests? Am I have children? Do I don't have children? Now it's not clearly defined, and it's not meant to be.
But how does it work practically if I'm choosing to put it on the blech?
You have to decide.
My intention can be virali. Isn't it always Vitova?
Yeah, you want it hot, even though you know it's not going to be as good as it would be.
Okay. So it's not virali to put it on the blech. It's
right.
I know
it's less for the
quality,
food,
but warmer, and the warmer outweighs the quality, and that's why I'm allowed to do it.
It's like that old joke of the two old ladies complaining about the food. One says, "The food in this place is just terrible. I can't eat it." And the other lady says, "Yes, you're right. And the portions are so small." So yes. Okay. I like the old lady jokes. These are from my mother. My mother told me these jokes. Okay. So you want the food to be big portions and tasty, but sometimes you got to sacrifice one of them. V'katav od Rabbeinu Yerucham, mikol makom muchach me'hagemara. What does he mean by mikol makom? We'll have to figure that out. Mikol makom muchach me'hagemara she'im lo nitztanen. And here I want to read it differently, but just to make it clear. She'im lo nitztanen ela Shina miritichato ktsat mutter lachziro. It doesn't have to be, as long as it's not mitztanen, but as long as if it got a little bit colder, then you could put it back. And what does he mean? Even if it's when he says mikol makom, what does he mean? He means mikol makom, whether it's mistamek v'yafelo or mistamek v'ralo. In both of those cases, you could return it as long as it's only shina meritichato tzat. It only went down from its boiling a little bit. Okay, ad kan lashona. All that's Rabbeinu Yerucham and the Rabbeinu Yonah really, as brought by this mach. Aval Rambam. Oh, so here's the Rambam we promised you. Aval Rambam katav perik tet. Hamavashel ala or davar shahaya mivushal called sarko. Oh, davar she'enu tzarich bishul klal patur ad kan lashon. So he says if you cook something that is fully cooked, there's no chiyuv. There's no chiyuv. He doesn't distinguish between liquids and solids. Because we said that if you brought something up from cold to hot, we didn't say it's a gezerah. Did we say it's a gezerah? That you shouldn't do that because of a gezerah of something else? No. We said it's bishul. It's asur d'oraita to get something cold and make it hot, even if it was fully cooked. We were talking not in the world of gezerah, we were talking in the world of the Torah. And the Rambam says a putter. So maybe you can't do it from din rabbanan, but but he doesn't say it's usher. It's so therefore, even if it's liquid, if it's fully cooked, finished, you can't be chayav on bishul. The katav harava magid shekatav kain that the Rambam wrote such miditnan kol sheba bechamim lifnei Shabbat shorin oto bechamim b'Shabbat. That's our Gemara. She'im haya bo mishum bishul, afilu b'chamei or haya chayiv. In other words, what does it mean b'chamei or? I think he means mayim, water that was heated by fire. In other words, if it would have been she'im haya bo mishum bishul, if there would have been a chiyuv of bishul after something that got cold, then even if you put it in, if you're shore in hot water, it'd be chayev. Haya chayev. Elavadai leisbe mishum bishul mishum hachi shari lishoto b'chamin. In other words, the permission to put something in water was because of that, because it said anything that was in water before Shabbat, you can put in water on Shabbat. So you see that would have been bishul, but because it was already bishul, ain bishul achar bishul. Umiu ala or mamesh mitaser, but putting it directly on the fire would be forbidden, or in a pot that's on the fire. Midrabanan, why midrabanan? Because it's like looks like cooking. V'zen ilmad midin chazarat mitstamek viralo. Okay, that's the end of the Magid. Umashma midivrei Rambam. I think that's the end. Or maybe well. Umashma midivrei Rambam. The kishelonit pashel called sarko. Wasn't fully cooked. Afal pi shegia lemachal ben drosai shayach be bishul v'chiyuv nami michayev. So it's not like the rosh. As long as it can still be cooked, you can be chayev. But there's no distinction between liquid and solid. V'Rava Magid katav shedata Rashba. Another opinion, Rashba. Sa uktzat mefarshim. Shekol shenitpashel kamachal ben drosai shuv ein bo mishum chiyuv bishul devar Torah. So we're getting this machloket now. If machal ben drosai is enough to permit it to exempt you from a chiyuv, and the Rashba says yes, and the Rambam presumably says no. You have to be fully cooked. V'nira de lefi divreihem kol shenitpashel kamachal ben drosai muter lishroto b'chamin b'Shabbat. It only has to be partially cooked and you could put it into the hot water, says the Rashba. Kevan kish mivashlo al haor lechiyuv aval ledat harambam kol shelonit b'shel kol tzarko. But the Rambam holds that it has to be fully cooked. Im shara oto b'chamim b'Shabbat chayev chatat k'mevashel haor atzmo k'mo sheketavti l'mala. So there's a machloket Rambam and Rashba on whether machal ben drosai is the threshold to exempt you from chiyuv. Mikol makom lo chilek bein, and here's the point I kept saying: lo chilek bein tavshil sheyesh bo marak liyavish. And there he says clearly the Rambam and the Rashba did not distinguish between whether there's liquid or not liquid. Begam b'kerakaf bet the Rambam katav harav magid b'shem harashba The divrei akol tavshil shenitbashel miyerev Shabbos v'nitztanen mutter lechamamo keneged hamedora afilu b'makom shehayad zoledet bo. So anything can be heated up on Shabbat, say the Rashba and the Rambam. V'hu shelo yiten al gebei hamedora, but you can't put it directly on the fire, or al gebei hakira, or on the stove. Ad kan l'shono. V'lo chilek ben yesh bo marak le'ein bo alma mikol gavna. We see he didn't distinguish. We see in any way you can heat these things. Doesn't matter whether they're liquid or solid. So this is a totally important position here. The Rashba and the Rambam, doesn't matter, even liquids you can heat up. V'shari litno l'keneged hamedor b'makom sheyad zoledet bo v'im ken matnit, you can put it next to the fire, v'im ken matnitin the kol sheba b'chamim milifnei Shabbat afilu b'yesh b'marak namihi. So everything is learned from that Mishnah, that anything that was cooked, whether cooked means, that's the machlokes between the Rambam and the Rashba. Cooked means fully cooked, says the Rambam. Cooked means partially cooked, but enough to be eaten, says the Rashba. Either way, however you paskin, it doesn't matter whether it's liquid or dry. V'ken nira dataran. And also, if that wasn't enough for you to convince you that the Teimanim are right, I mean, the Teimanim are just following the Rambam, but to convince you that that opinion is right, also the Ran says this, Shekataba perakira, gabe hada asrina la'aniach kiton shel mayim, that you can put a big pot of water next to a fire, even in a place that's hot. Mihu hani mili b'devar shelonit bashel aval sonen. But if it's cold, shenit bashel, but it's fully cooked, mutter la'nicho, says the Ran. Afilu b'kli rishon, you put it in a pot, that's a first pot, even as long as off the fire. O keneged hamedora, or next to the fire. Even though it's going to get very hot. Because this is not the normal way of cooking. In other words, therefore there's no gezerah on it. In other words, the gezerah would be near a kibisha, but it's not near a kibisha because it's a kli rishon that's not on the fire, or it's next to a fire but not on a fire. And the proof to this miditanan kol Shabbat b'chamim l'fnei Shabbat shorin oto b'chamim b'Shabbat klomar afilu b'kli rishon. Oh, so he learns that as that you can put it in a pot that is heated up directly on a fire as long as it's not on the fire when you do it. I'm adding that. Fine. I think we can stop there. I read that was a lot, but we see. Let's summarize. First of all, we see that the Rosh, what does the Rosh hold? How was the Rosh different from the Tur? The only difference between the Rosh and the Tur was whether it's Machal ben Drosai or not. But in either case, they both hold that if it's cold and you heat it up, based on Pashtus of Rashi, is Bishul. Even though it's fully cooked, whatever fully cooked is. Or fully cooked or Machal ben Drosai.
If there's marak, right?
If there's marak, yes, thank you. We saw Rabbeinu Yerucham basically added this idea that if it's mitztamek viralo, it's also going to be mutter even if there's marak and even if it's cold. And then we saw the Rashba and the Rambam and the Ran that all seem to say once it's fully cooked, end of story. There's no gezerah even, because the gezerah is only on nira kibishul. There's no gezerah, even though the Rambam said patur, what he really meant in our case would be mutter. Because there's no D'Rabbanan prohibition that we know about of heating things. There's in other words, except for like Shema, you'll push the coals, but if there's no coals, then it'll be permitted, or if it's not near a kibishul. Okay. Let's look at the Shulchan Aruch.
And the Ran was a little different, right? The Ran was sort of saying the normal way of cooking is the issue.
No, I think that's just. I think the Ran is just concerned with a side point, which is maybe we should be Oser D'Rabbanan anyway, even though it's not Bishul, because it's near a Kibishul, and that we don't have to worry about because it's not near a Kibishul, because it doesn't look like cooking because it's an unusual way. I think that's all he's dealing with. All right, Shin Yud Chet. And we got to see how we paskin. Dalid. Here, Max, you want to read?
Yes. Get there. Okay. Tav shel shnis bashel kol tzorko. Yesh bo mishum bishul im nitztanen. Okay. If once it gets to kol tzorko, there is bishul achar bishul if it cools down.
Which is like who?
That's the tour. Kol tzorko.
That's the tour. Okay.
The V'yeshomrim davka im mitztamek v'yafelo. But the Ramah paskins Rabbeinu Yerucham that's only if it gets better.
Right.
V'im lo nispashel kol tzorko, afilu nispashel kamachal ben drusai, shayach bo bishul, afilu be'odor seach. V'hanimile sheyesh bo.
So wait, who is he rejecting there?
He's rejecting the Rosh.
Exactly.
Who said that it was at, yeah. Right, who said Ben Drusai?
Right. Go ahead.
V'hani mile sheyesh bo bishul achar bishul, v'tavshil sheyesh bo marak. Aval davar shnis bashal kvar v'hu yavesh mutter l'shavuso bechamin b'Shabbos. Right, that only applies to liquidy dishes, but not anything dry. Right,
and notice, by the way, he doesn't say anything about rove or not rove.
Right.
That's why I brought you that other source in the Beis Yosef.
Right. The imu davar yavesh shelo nispashel milifnei haShabbos ein shorino so bechamin b'Shabbos aval medichino so bechamin b'Shabbos chutz min hamaliach hayashan umin dag shnekra kulius ha'ispanin she'inam tzrichim bishol ela ma'at v'hadachatan higmar melachtan.
Right. So here he's being more lenient than I wanted to be, because he says, he's just quoting what we saw, but what did he say? He said anything, right? Vimu devar yavesh shelonit bashel medifnei Shabbat. I don't know. He's talking about a strawberry. You could pour boiling hot water on a strawberry. Okay. Sounds like it.
Yeah, but he hasn't answered the question from a Kli Rishon or Kli Sheni, right? At this point.
Look at Tet Vav in the Magen Avram.
Magen Avraham, yes, I know. Yeah. So
here, Max, read the
Tet Vav, you said?
Tet Vav.
Okay.
We say pouring hot water on it. So what pouring are we talking about?
Hainu shemarin alav mikli sheni. Aval ashor l'shara so afilu b'kli sheni demechse kimavashel.
Oh, wait a second. Guess what I said. Wait, let's read that again. You have to pour from a Kli Sheni, not even in right, but not pouring from a Kli Rishon, and also asur l'shoto afilu b'Kli Sheni. Why? The Mexican mavasha. It looks like cooking. That's okay. Strange. It's strange. Who cooks in a Kli Sheni? Why is it near the Mexican mavasha? It's very strange.
You don't know what number of Kli I'm up to when you see me do it necessarily.
What?
You don't know
Yeah,
what
you don't
number
cook in a
Kli I'm up to.
Yeah, no, of course you do. Your Kli Sheni, I mean, a coffee cup is certainly different from a pot. Nobody, if you did it in a coffee cup, for sure it's a Kli Sheni. Nobody puts a coffee cup on the fire.
Or serving.
If it's just a pot, if it's mamish, you just poured boiling water from one pot to another, then I could hear it. But there's certainly, so we could distinguish maybe between those two cases. Maybe he's talking only about that second case. Okay. Go ahead. V'lo dami.
The lo dami letavlin b'siv tet, the tavlin asuyin lematek kadera, the lo mechse kimavashel. Right, but it's different from the spices, which we'll talk about later,
which you could put in.
Which you can put in, but it's not. You're not cooking the spices. It's just sweetening the dish.
Right, like putting sugar in your tea is different from you're not cooking. Nobody thinks you're cooking sugar.
Right.
Veneerally,
veneerally
the batzal onions.
The batzal dino kitavlin, the avidi letame, right? Onions are like spices.
Right, you put them in. Sometimes you put, or let's say you put in fresh, parsley in your soup right before you serve it. You're not cooking the parsley. You're just flavoring the soup with parsley. This is a very subtle distinction. But he seems to be saying that onions you could put in your hot klisheni because it doesn't look like cooking.
Wouldn't this also apply to tea to some extent, right? Tea in a klisheni is not cooking the tea, you're flavoring the water.
Perhaps
The
that's
Mishnah
Kiddush of
Berurah
Rav
doesn't
Joel.
agree. Yeah. Well, that's
your kid. You're saying that's a Kiddush. You're saying that you see it in the Magen Avram already.
I do. The Mishnah Berurah disagrees. He thinks tea is kale bishul, but
Right.
For Joe, that sounds like
I hadn't thought about
tea
that.
versus tea. What you
What was
said
that,
sounds
Larry?
like herbal tea. What you said sounds like it would apply to herbal tea.
This is what's the difference?
Oh, I only drink herbal tea.
Herbal
So,
tea
yeah,
is to
I
make
don't know.
minty. I have a mint tea. It's to make
No,
minty.
but what's the
water.
difference? Why should the din be different?
Because if I have tea, I actually want to take the tea out of the grinds. It's a different process.
I want the flavor of the tea to go into the water, just like I want the flavor of the onions to go into the water. In other words, I'm not trying to cook onions. I'm not trying. If the tea would somehow miraculously not, I'm not interested in cooking tea. It's not like I put a piece of chicken in there and I want to cook the chicken. I put the tea in to flavor the water. I'm not trying to cook tea. It's true that I have to.
You're not going to eat the tea. Most importantly,
What?
you don't eat the tea leaves.
Exactly. You don't eat the tea. You throw away the
That's
tea.
the real.
You're not trying to cook tea. You're trying to flavor water. That's why I say it's a very subtle distinction, because it doesn't matter. Of course, you're cooking the tea. Of course, you're cooking the tea a little bit, but it's klisheni ein mavashel. In other words, from the din of bishul, we're exempt because it's klisheni, and from the din of nira k'mevashel, we're exempt because doesn't look like nobody thinks I'm trying to cook tea. I think I'm trying to flavor water. That's what he's saying. I say it's quite a, I don't know. It's a subtle, or I don't know how you say it, but it's a fine point that it's maybe a pilpul. Okay. Wait, we have a little Ramah here, no?
At the end, you're saying?
Yeah.
V'hu adin kol davar kasher she'ein ra'ui le'echol klal below shriya de'ashur l'sharuso b'shabes tehave gmar malacha. Right, so anything that's firm, that needs to be soaked in something before you can eat it, that's its gmar malacha, so no go.
Wait, we're talking about to pour on it or to soak it? To soak it.
I think soak it. Yeah, soak. Yeah.
So wait, so again, could you put a strawberry in a hot water and a cliche well, the Magen Avram would say in a klisheni also not, because nira kabishul. By the way, just to understand, the Magen Avram is saying it's pouring from a klisheni because he paskins like a very important din, which is Rabbeinu Tam. I think it's brought in one of the commentaries here. I don't see it right now.
It's in the Eshel Avraham. In the Eshel Avraham, he brings.
I don't want to look at the Eshel.
Yeah.
But Rabbeinu Tam holds that Irui Kli Rishon is like Kli Rishon. So therefore, according to Rabbeinu Tam, the Irui has to be from a klisheni that we're talking about here. But if you don't hold like that, but we do paskin like that. So that's why the Magen Avram is saying what he's saying. We have 10 minutes, or not 8 minutes. I guess maybe we have hay to do still. I guess we'll stop a little early today, and not start hay yet. Hay is going to deal with bishul. It's really short. It's really not such long, but not in 8 minutes. And that is bishul of bishul achar afia. Can you put croutons in your soup? Or can you, and here I'll give you a great example. Rav Avadia says that black coffee, what in America you call Turkish coffee, and what in Greece you call Greek coffee, and what in Israel you call black coffee, which is grounds that you just put in your cup with when you pour hot water into it. So Rav Avadia says, wait a second, let's think about this for a second. The grounds, before they ground them, they roasted the coffee beans. So it's afui, it's baked. And if you hold ein bishul achar afia, there's no bishul achar afia, then you could make Greek coffee or Turkish coffee. By the way, when you're in Greece, never order Turkish coffee. They will be very annoyed with you. They don't like the Turks. I speak from experience. You have to order Greek coffee. Anyway, that is not bishul, says Rav Avadia, because I mean it is bishul. Ein bishul achar afia. There's no bishul achar afia. So you can pour boiling hot water, directly into your cup. You can put just like you normally would make your what they call in slang in Hebrew is bolts, your mud. You can make your mud in the normal way. But if you hold bishul achar afia, then you couldn't. And that's how the Ashkenazim hold. So we'll see that next week. But in the meantime, we learned very well. I think we learned very well this whole din of ein bishul, of when there's bishul achar bishul, and in fact, there is bishul achar bishul when it got cold. And the Ramah brings that it's mitzamek v'yafelo. If it's mitzamek, I mean, he says yesh. What do you do with that yesh? You'll have to see the Mishnah Brura to decide. And I wanted to say one more thing. Good. I have a minute. Does everybody have a Mishnah Brura? Here, get a Mishnah Brura. I have 2 minutes. I want to show you something in Mishnah Brura. I'm sure Joel was going to teach this anyway, but I'll leave him a ton of stuff to talk about in any case. Look at Mishnah Brura Kaf Tet. And Kaf Tet is on our Siman, our Seif. Kaf Tet. What does he say? Back to the Shulchan Aruch. Shaykh bo bishul afilu bo odoroteach hanimili sheyesh bo bishul achar bishul b'tavshil sheyesh bo marak. It's only if there's liquid there. Aval davar shenitbashel kfar v'hu yavesh mutter. So on that word marak, it has marak in it. It has some kind of sauce in it, soup. Look marak in kaftet. And this is what we talked about last week. Dibidavar lach kevan de azil chamimoto. Once its warmth has dissipated, v'nitztanen, and it became cold, batel mimenu shem bishulo harishon. It loses its bishul. That's what I quoted last week in the name of my brother 30 years ago telling me. That is exactly this idea, that when something is mevushal and then it is liquid and it gets cold, you don't see that it's cold. Like, I mean, of course, this depends on what you're talking about. Let's say milk. I mean, let's say you heat up milk and then you let it get cold again. You don't boil it, but let's say you heat it up till 180 degrees and then you let it get cold again. You can't really tell. In fact, our milk is heated up and we think it's not heated up. We think it's cold milk, or we think it's not, we think it's, but so when you heat something up and then let it get cold, it's not clear that it was cooked again. So it becomes cooking it again if you heat it up again. That's that explanation. That explanation works great, except it doesn't work for like I said, like chicken soup. And that's why I have my other explanation that is maybe for chicken soup, you could say it's mitzamek. It's mitzamek v'yafelo in the sense it's always like that, because it gets more intense, the flavor, and that's presumably good. Joel, you want to say something?
No, I think I've been thinking all week. I think the two explanations together is the best I've heard, I think, if you put the two together. So
Thank you. But here you go. Here it is. That idea is there in the Mishnah Berurah, that when it gets a liquid, you don't know anymore that it was cooked. So that's the important point. That's why, and that's the basis for this din of that liquids when you heat them up again. It's called bishul again. And it's such a svara that it's actually a din d'oraita. Okay, we'll end here. Shkoyach to everybody.
Thank you very much.
thank
Sure.
you, Ravna.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Right.